Now, there are a lot of different properties of CSS that we'll be using, but I've included a link down here in your work files out to a page that's a good reference for all the different properties that we're going to be working with. This is a page on the W3C site, which is the governing organization for both HTML5 and CSS. They basically decide what features are going to be included in it. The property names and values are over here at the left, and as I scroll down the page, you can see that there's quite a few of them. I'll scroll down here almost to the bottom, and there we can see the text align property that I picked out to use. It has values of left, right, center, and justified, like you kind of expect, and you also notice that you can look up these values if you need to. If I go up a little bit to the Fs, you can see that this is where I got my font style attribute from. There's a couple other ones, font variant, font weight, and even size. But the one property that I want to try out next is up here set up as color. Now we're going to want to set the color for a lot of different things on our web page. So I want to go through how to actually define a color and make sure you get the color set up that you want. Let's set up our document so that we can try it out. Now the first thing I'll do is clean up some of these alignments because my page is looking a little bit messy. So I'll go up to the top and I'll just remove the style rules that I've set up for H1 and P, and we'll start over. Notice I've left the selector and the brackets there so we can just fill in a style rule as needed. Now I wanted to try out the color attribute, so let me go ahead to the H1, and first we'll add in the color property. The color property sets the color of the text, so we're going to use a semicolon, and then we need to assign a value for the color. Now if you've looked at some source code from some other people's websites, you might have started to see some colors being identified with some funny characters. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a color. Now, the most common way to define a color is using hexadecimal values. You can identify those because they start with the pound sign, and then they usually have 6 digits after them defining what color it is. I'm going to put in a color of FF0000, and I'll put a semicolon at the end of my rule. Now that color happens to be red, but it does look a little funny. So let's pause a minute and talk about this hexadecimal format that we're using to define colors with. First of all, hexadecimal means 16, and basically it's a numbering system that counts up to 16. Our own decimal number counting system uses the digits 0 through 9, and that gives us 10 places. I'll type them out right next to it here. In a hexadecimal system, we have 16 numbers, so to make up for the rest of the numbers, since we ran out of numeric characters, we use the first letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, and F. It doesn't matter whether you use uppercase or lowercase. Now in this numbering system, strange as it is, F actually represents the number 15. And the way that this is all used to describe colors is in our color description, we have 3 pairs of 2-digit numbers. I'll separate them so that we can kind of see. The first 2 digits represent how much red we have, the second 2 digits represent how much blue, and the last 2 digits represent how much green, and those mix together to form any color that you basically need to use on your web page. If we take a look at the 3 components here, we don't really have to count using these funny hexadecimal numbers. All we have to do is know that F is a very high number. So if you kind of think of 99 as a high number, this is the same kind of thing, FF, but in this case, it represents the number 255. Now, it all seems strange, but this is the most popular way for people to define colors. Let me get rid of all my extra text here, and I'll close up the spaces, and we'll try it out. I'll save my page, go back over to our browser and refresh, and you can see that now both of my H1 tags have taken on that nice red color. And if we've used what we learned about hexadecimal values, you may not know all the different colors and the mixing of red, green, and blue that it'll take to get them, but if you see a color like this, where I've got 00 for red, and then an FF for green, and a 00 for blue, I would expect this color to be green. And if I save my page, I can go back out to my document, and you can see that my headings both turn green now. Now, no one expects web developers to memorize this hexadecimal color set, but when you're working with color, You can basically open up just about any modern paint package you want to. I'll open up Photoshop right here because I happen to have it around. And you can see that when I'm mixing out a color in Photoshop, I can choose just about any color that I want. And down here at the bottom, I can see the hexadecimal equivalent of whatever that color is going to be. So here you can see I've picked out a kind of a nice rich blue. I'm just going to copy the hex number right out of the field. I'll go back into my document. And let's paste that in for the H1 color. I'll save my document. We'll go out and test it. And now you can see that my headings are now shown in that exact color of blue. Using this hex system, there are a couple of other colors that you'll probably see a lot and you probably should be able to recognize. If you specify a color of FF for red, FF for green, and FF for blue, that's the maximum for everything, that actually will result in the color white. And if I start off with a color with 0 for all the different values, so we're not mixing any red, green, or blue in, that would represent black. Now, using hexadecimal numbers like this is not the only way to define your colors. You actually have a couple of other ways that you can define them. For one, you can actually use very simple color names to replace these hexadecimal values. If you simply want white or black, all you'd have to do is go into the color field and type the name. This will work in just about every browser, and most of the basic colors that you would expect are covered. You can use colors like red or yellow, and you can also use some strange colors like bisque or burleywood. There's references online that show you what color is which. But in general, I tend to use a paint application and just choose the colors I want. So I stick with the hexadecimal equivalent most of the time. Now there is one other way to describe color that's new for HTML5 and CSS3, and that is using RGB equivalents. So the final way that you can mix a color is once again by specifying a red, green, and blue component, but you can use RGB values. I'll do it here for red for my color H1 again. First of all, I'll specify the mechanism I want to use to define the color as RGB. That's different than using the pound sign. Here I use a parentheses, and I specify the red, green, and blue components as normal numbers. So if we wanted to use red, I might use 255, which is the maximum, comma 0 for green, comma 0 for blue. I'll close my parentheses and save my document changes. And let's go over and refresh our browser again. And you can see that we're back to a red heading like we had before. You're free to choose whichever method you like, but I'll probably, for the rest of these lessons, stick to a hexadecimal value and just use Photoshop to look them up.